And here we are. So I'm here today with an individual that I've met because I listened to her appearances on a couple of Comics and Motion shows, actually. And I think we have Tony Farina to thank for this connection. And so is Ada McCarthy. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ada. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your sort of podcast beginnings is probably a good place to start.
Great. Thanks for having me on Genuine Chit-Chat, Mike. I've really enjoyed the episodes of the show that I listen to and any excuse to chit-chat with a new person. My podcast beginnings, I actually met Tony Farina through graduate school at Naropa University. Two older professionals older. I don't know if I'm older. I'm 33. Old enough. Going back to school, he was one of the first people to just meet me, befriend me, answer all of the questions, just be a generally cool dude. So that's how we got to know each other. And then he slowly warmed me up to the idea of podcasts and being on a podcast. And so my first experience was, well, actually, I did a podcast a few years ago with another friend named Tony about a play that I had written and was in with his wife. But that felt very isolated because it was in the context of this play. And I don't know, he recorded it on his phone. I didn't even realize it was going to be a podcast at the time. So anyway, my first Comics in Motion podcast was discussing Fiona Staples and Brian Vaughn's saga with Tony. One of my favorite comics of all time. And then Rhea and Tanya were kind enough to have me on Miss Marvel, despite the fact that I am a Marvel novice. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Really loved the show. Had a great time talking with them about it. And here we are. This is my third Comics in Motion show appearance, as it were.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's one of those things with the Comics in Motion sort of family and the extended family, because we've got like Genuine Chit Chat and Spider Dan, The Secret Bores, and 20th Century Geek, which are all shows which regularly collaborate with those in the Comics in Motion family, and we're becoming like this associated network. Obviously, I'm kind of cheating because I have two shows, because I've got Comics in Canon, which is literally on the feed of Comics in Motion, but I've kind of stolen it a little bit because on my YouTube I've got them both. But when you get into, like, myself and Tony were two of the originals. Obviously, we say the Podfathers are Dave and Chris because they started the actual podcast Comics in Motion when it's just a TV and movie thing, and then myself and Tony collaborated with them quite a bit, and they discussed about the idea of making it like an open thing, like having different shows each day of the week, that kind of idea. And so me and Tony were quite early. I think us and Max Bowen were the earliest ones on the channel itself. And every time someone joined, they always go, God, it's so nice. Like, it's kind of, it's a fun, nice thing, but it's also like, it's really good. But also I'm appearing on loads of podcasts and my family are asking me what I keep doing every week. I'm disappearing for an hour or two at a go. And especially when we've got the weekly discussion shows about the Marvel or the Star Wars shows on Disney Plus and some of the other things that get spoken about. And we've got the book club going on and all kinds of other stuff. It becomes a thing where there's so many podcasts one could guest on. When you first get into it, it's like, I'm going to do everything. And then now I'm like, yeah, I've made 2 podcasts. I've got a Patreon podcast. I do Star Wars weekly shows. I'm like, I couldn't. People have asked me before, would you want to do another podcast? I can't. I don't have the time. So you're at the start. Rhea and Jack both did what you did, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm going to guest on a few podcasts. It's like Tonya did. And she was like, I'm going to guest on a few here and there. It's going to be fun. And then slowly this idea forms. And you're like, I've actually got an idea for a podcast. It doesn't need to be weekly. It doesn't even need to be regular. Just every now and then, kind of like Femme on Film to a degree. I'll just have a conversation with someone, release it on this network of loads of other cool stuff. And here we are. So I'm basically just lightly trying to tell you that 3 podcasts in a short space of time, you're on the train. So start thinking some podcast ideas, because you're not allowed to just always be guesting. I'm joking in that regard. You could always be a guest.
That's funny that you mentioned that. Tony Farina just recently emailed me and said, oh, you should pitch Femme on Poetry to Rhea. So we've been discussing that. And I'm talking Beloved with Tanya in a few weeks. September. We're only a couple weeks away from September. Holy smokes.
It's crazy.
But yeah, I'm intrigued to be entering the world of podcasts and riding the train, as it were.
Yeah, because you also, you said before we press record that before you started recording podcasts with sort of Tony and things, you hadn't really entered the world of listening. Tony kind of introduced you into that as well. So how did that go? Like, I'm interested what you listened to.
Well, my partner, who's also named Tony, lots of Tonys, is a big podcast fan and has often recommended them or has had them on in the house. And I've liked NPR and talk radio occasionally. I don't tend to seek it out. So I've had it kind of in the background. But once I featured on Tony's podcast, I felt like I should do some homework and I shouldn't just be showing up on podcasts having never listened to them. So that was when I kind of started listening to some of the more comics in motion podcasts and venturing out a little bit. And then once I started teaching at Siena Heights University, I teach fully online and fully asynchronous courses. And I realized that a lot of students really prefer to listen to podcasts versus read a paper online or go visit a website or even watch a YouTube video. So I started seeking them out a little bit more for that purpose specifically. And I will admit, I'm still not, I've only recently worked up to the point where I can listen to anything on double speed ever. And I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, but I dabble. I'm a podcast dabbler, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's like my partner Megan, she got into podcasting because of me, obviously, and I've got podcasts. She's appeared on my show numerous times, and I would have said her to say hi, but she was just legitimately just falling asleep on the sofa.
Totally fair.
She asked me to get a blanket for her, so I was just like, okay, you're not moving anywhere, so I'm going to wake her up at the very end of this. She may or may not be downstairs on the sofa. She might have made her way to bed, but she falls asleep on the sofa very frequently. I'm sure you'll be here at some point, even if it's amidst the many Comics in Motion collaboration shows, but that'll be something. Everyone meets Megan eventually. But I
really enjoyed her when she took us to school on Marie Antoinette. I listened to that film episode recently.
That was pretty good. That came out of nowhere. Like when we were watching Marie Antoinette, she just knew these couple of things, but I didn't realize the extent of what she knew, which was quite funny. And so that'll be a little thing. I'll put a link to that in the description. The recent Femme on Film appearance myself and Megan did for Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette. So thank you, Rhea, and obviously thank you, Ada, for mentioning that. I was going to say with like listening and things with Megan, she listens to podcasts a bit, but she has her own ones. Like there's ones that I listen to either on the regular or occasionally when one piques my interest. And Megan's got completely different ones, which is fine. And so she listens to things like the Office Ladies podcast and the Parks and Recollection podcast and a few other sort of ones in that similar vein. And she kind of flits about, but she's also been getting into audiobooks a bit recently as well. And that's something that I didn't really get until probably about 2 years ago. I was like, listen to an audiobook, it's like 8 to 15 hours, sometimes 20 if it's a really chunky book. And I think Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is like 21, 22 hours or something mad. If not, yeah, more, it might be more than that actually. But because Megan's been listening to those as well, because she's rereading the Harry Potter books by listening to them. But she got an Audible subscription for free with her phone contract, and I'd done a trial or two just to listen to a couple of Star Wars books because I was running out of time to consume Star Wars. So I was like, I have about an hour and a half of commuting each day in total, so as well as podcasts and music and everything else I do, let's add audiobooks. And I've found that they're really. I listen to like a Jane Austen, Sense and Sensibility. I've never consumed any Jane Austen content, and they've got this whole thing on Audible where there's like one that's narrated by Claire Foy, one's narrated by Billie Piper, and they've got different voice actors for different people in it as well. So it's like a full audio drama of Jane Austen. So I was listening to that as well. There's so many cool things on there, and I'm like, if it wasn't for podcasts, I probably wouldn't have got into audiobooks. So I know that you mentioned audiobooks. I'm intrigued by, are there any in particular you're listening to, or how have you found the transition?
Yes, my number one recommendation. I listened to Catherine Valente's September series on audiobook a while ago. I think that was one of my first audiobooks. I had read it, and then I listened to it as well, and that was just really fun. But most recently, I listened to His Name is George Floyd. I can't for the love of me remember the name of the two journalists who wrote the book.
It'll be in the description.
Perfect. it's phenomenal. It is not only is it a beautifully told story that really delves into the autobiography of the person, it just is this whole course on the craft of weaving together journalism, history, and storytelling. It's this whole kind of historical analysis of the events in the United States that have led to the carceral realities and racism present and prevalent in policing in the United States, told through the familial history of George Floyd. It's incredible. Not a light read, obviously, but phenomenal. And then what else have I been listening to? I've been listening to Toni Morrison read Beloved, which is phenomenal. I've not heard her read her work out loud before, and it's just changing everything about how I've read the book. And then I've been listening to Sister Outsider, the essay collection by Audre Lorde. It's not read by her, but it's a nice listen because a lot of the essays in it are actually speeches. So to hear it out loud is a very different experience than reading the book. And then I've also been listening to Donald Goines. What is the book called? I think, Dope Fiend. I listened to Dope Fiend by Donald Goines lately. He's an author that my father-in-law recommended a while back. Kind of gritty mystery thriller type book.
That's awesome. I'm going to put all these in the description to make sure like people can tune in and just easily find it, just because it's one of those things with books where, if a friend of mine from work called Matt, he said at some point he'll probably come on the show, but he's Australian. Not that has any bearing on what I'm about to say, but there you go. Just for when listeners, when I eventually talk about my Australian friend Matt again, then that'll be who I'm talking about. He said that his dream would be like if you could just give him infinite time almost, or just like be like his money, but the condition is you have to do one thing for the next 6 months or a year or something. He said, just lock me in a giant library. He's like, I would just sit in there and it would just be, because there's so many great works of fiction, and the problem is like I want to read, I haven't read, for example, much Dickens, Great Expectations or anything. I know that Tony is a massive Jane Austen fan. I've only recently even known the story of Sense and Sensibility. I don't know, I've not seen the film of Pride and Prejudice or any of those other ones, or like the six that she wrote, so I know barely anything about her. But it's like, but the time I have before bed normally, mainly before the dog when I was less tired, but I was reading a lot more, and I was primarily reading Star Wars comics, Star Wars books, or other comics as well, some of the things we've tackled in the Comics Motion Book Club and other sort of heavy hitters of the comic and book world in a sense. But then it's like I still don't have enough time. I often think, I'd love to have just a day of just reading all day, but when does anyone have that? Exactly. And I just think audiobooks are such a nice way to kind of in times where you may not be able to consume that content or thought you couldn't, driving or doing chores or something like that, it's such a nice way to consume those things. And there's so many books I want to read. There's just not enough time, let alone the series and the movies and everything else I want to do with myself.
It adds the possibilities significantly, and that's what I've really just discovered about audiobooks, how much more book is possible with some listening. Now I can listen while I'm cooking, while I'm walking. Have you listened to any good audiobooks lately?
Most of the audiobooks I've listened to have been Star Wars ones. So I rate them very highly because they're very high production. They've got voice actors doing like a lot of cool voices, and they've got like full on sound effects. They've got the music from Star Wars. They've got it's like a full audio drama. It's narrated by individuals who can do a lot of voices. There's one which was Han Solo's last shot, and it was about Han and Lando about 10 years after episode 6, and there's 3 narrators in it. One is January Lavoie, one was Daniel Jose Older, who's the writer, and then there was one other, and I can't remember if it's Jonathan Davis or Mark Thompson. It's one of the bigger Star Wars authors, narrators, so apologies for whoever that is if I've forgotten them, if none of them was correct. But having 3 different people was really interesting because it did a lot of time jumps, but the way it did it was if it it was 3 main time periods, and each narrator was a different time period. So it just made it so much easier to kind of, and with January Lavoie, it had a character L337 in it, featuring that quite a lot. So when she was reading L337's lines, it sounded a lot more like her. Whereas one of the other narrators was reading a lot of Lando stuff, and he did a really good Lando impression. So a lot of the Star Wars ones I've been reading are really enjoyable. But I was really surprised of how good Sense and Sensibility was in the Audible collection. It had so many different voice actors in, but listening to a Jane Austen novel and hearing all different people speak in the proper way, like the Queen's English almost, of the way it's being spoken, and everyone's speaking very prim and proper, but also there's a lot of it is obviously British countryside and things, and so you've got people outside talking, and just you can hear like bugs or like birds chirping in the background, or like the grass rustling. And in moments like that, because it's recorded in Britain, I recognise bird sounds. So I'm like, when was it? It was a couple months ago when the weather was a bit rubbish, because at the moment we're going through like a heat wave, as we always do. It's called summer in Britain, but we seem to think summer doesn't exist, and then we have really hot month or so, and it's always a heat wave. But there was one time I think I was either doing a bit of walking or the weather was miserable and I was driving and things, and I was just listening to Jane Austen, and I could just hear like there's the birds chirping and just the like crickets going in the background, and it was just people talking about the intricacies of life in Jane Austen's era, which I think was the early or late 1800s. I always get more earlier 1800s. So it's just that sort of, I love Star Wars, but it's, we need to save the world or stop this evil guy doing crazy stuff, or there's all these big plans, don't let the Empire get this. But with Jane Austen, it's just so low key and chill, but it's still thrilling in many ways, but it's just really pleasant. And I found the audio element, if people have Audible subscriptions, the Jane Austen collection, all 6 of her works, all fully narrated by different people, they're all included, so you just get it for free. It's about 40 hours for all of it, so I think each book works out somewhere between 8 and 12 hours or so. But I was so surprised by it. And I was about to listen to some more, and then a new Star Wars book came out. And I was like, okay, I've already got this Jane Austen. I can listen. That can be my comfort thing. But let's just jump on this new Star Wars book. But yeah, the Jane Austen one I really recommend, especially for people who haven't consumed any Jane Austen like myself. Like, I know Tony's a massive fan. I didn't know if you were a fan of her.
I'm trying to think. My good friend Tiffany is a huge Jane Austen fan, but I think I may have read some of Pride and Prejudice in high school, or like maybe skimmed it and pretended to read it for a class. But my Jane Austen exposure has been limited to movies. I've seen many. I know there are at least 2 that I've watched at Tiffany's behest and enjoyed. But I've never read, like actively picked up and for fun read Jane Austen, but I might like to audiobook it. As you were talking, it sounded, I do like a comfort listen. I went through The Anne of Green Gables. I guess that was another audiobook that I did early on. I watched the TV, there was a recent TV adaptation of Anne of Green Gables. And so then of course I went back and like listened to all of it because I'd read it as a child and I found it very comforting. I may seek out some Jane Austen for a similar vibe.
It is worth it for a nice, calm listen that you don't have to, there's a certain degree of plot and there's things that go on, but it's not something you have to intently listen to everything. It's not like a crime thriller where it's if you miss one line of dialogue, nothing will make sense. So it's that you don't have to rewind it that often because a lot of the time it's just, but hearing them speak in the proper Queen's English is just so, because even as a British individual, I'm not that well spoken. Certain Americans seem to think I am, and I'm really not. But even like hearing them speak, because it was like halfway between here and Shakespeare is Jane Austen, like in the timeline. So when because obviously Shakespeare, this approximately, because Shakespeare's 1600s, she's 1800s, we're 2000s. And so I've always had issues with reading Shakespeare and watching Shakespeare movies when they are true to the script, like William Shakespeare's by, I think it's Baz Luhrmann with DiCaprio and stuff. I wasn't a fan because it's all spoken in Shakespearean English, and it's so different than 400 odd years ago. So much of the language has changed. I still find it quite hard to grasp. Whereas with Jane Austen, the first the first few minutes or so of a listen, I was like, oh, this is spoken very differently. You know, they don't use they don't use the word. I think you probably know what the word is when you shorten a word and it's
contractions.
Yeah, exactly. So when you do that, they don't speak like that, and they speak steadily and slowly, and they enunciate everything they say, and there's no rush or anything, unless there is one moment where everyone's rushing about. But then, compared to how I speak, I was like, oh, it made me want to speak more proper, which is the least classy sentence ever.
That's, I guess I find the British accent very charming, and so it would be hard to convince me that you're not quote unquote well spoken because you're British. But that makes sense to me. I'd never considered the fact that Jane Austen is halfway between here and Shakespeare, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think it makes me. I want to consume more of that and then kind of slowly delve back into Shakespeare. I've never been the biggest Shakespeare fan, but I know he's amazing. You know, the stories he's written in themselves are incredible. And I do actively love Macbeth. I think that's such a cool story. But, you know, some of the other ones they're really good, but it's not they haven't aged well. It's just I'm kind of spoiled, you know, living in, especially as a millennial. So obviously in the early 2000s, you just had everything almost you could ever want, and then we got streaming. So I think I'm somewhat spoiled from that, but
there's so many options.
Yeah.
All the time.
What do you think of Shakespeare compared?
Oh my gosh. So until I studied Shakespeare as an actor, I didn't really get it. Wouldn't have called myself a Shakespeare fan. And then my first semester of undergrad, I was in college on an acting scholarship, and the first play that I was in college was Hamlet, an all-female version of Hamlet, directed by a woman. And Ren Pruitt schooled me on Shakespeare. She was part of the Queen's Company in New York City, Shakespearean actress, scholar, and it totally turned me on to the world of the Bard, and opened my eyes to all of the incredible linguistic possibilities and just like the roots. And I think too, there's something, because I'm American or from the US on this side of the pond, it's maybe more different. I don't know if it's more different from the way that I speak than, say, the way you speak, but it almost felt like learning a new language, which is very exciting. And I think, I don't know, for me, all of my Shakespeare appreciation has come from physically acting it or seeing it on stage or listening to it. I don't like go sit down and crack open my complete works of Shakespeare to read a play unless I have a purpose, unless I'm going to be, you know, breaking it down into an essay or into like acting it. But I love Shakespeare. I think probably actually A Midsummer Night's Dream and A Tempest are my two favorites. I like the fluffy stuff, I think.
I've not read or seen Tempest, but I have seen Midsummer's Night Dream. I've seen a performance of that, and I did really enjoy that as well. My friend, Tonya Todd's friend Tom Everett, who I've had on the show a few times, and I would now call a friend. I saw him perform Shakespeare because he's an actor as well, and we were talking about Shakespeare, and he was like, "I understand not liking it as much, but he was like, there's just a moment where it just clicked." And he said the same thing. He said, when I started performing it, I could really feel it, because he was like, you know, you get it in school and they go, and he walked across the room and did, whereas when you perform, it's like, and he walked and he crossed the room and he did this. And he's like, he said, Shakespeare is meant to be performed. We've just got translations of basically scripts from performance and plays. So it's one of those things. So he's like, when you read it, it just doesn't feel the same as performing it or watching someone perform it. So I completely understand that. Like, how long ago did you do Shakespeare in acting? I did Hamlet in 2007. Okay. And then a few more between then and 2012.
And then I taught theater and creative writing for about 10 years, for K through 12 ages. And so we'd often do an improv, and Shakespeare was a pretty common, was one of the more common things that I bring into teaching, just because it's so, I don't know, it's so much different when you're acting it out versus when you sit in the high school English classroom and
Yeah. And so leading from that, I want to ask, you've got your website out, or your blog slash website, and you release some poetry on there and things. And with your love of poetry, where did that sort of stem from? Did that come from when you kind of got into Shakespeare and things? Did it predate that? When was your poetry?
Poetry came first, for sure. I have been reading and writing poetry. I remember, I think my first book of poetry, the first one that I picked out actively, I got it for a Christmas present. It was the illustrated Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, like a children's classic illustrated. And I used to perform it for myself in my room. And I've been keeping diary, notebook, journals, probably since the age of 8 or 9. Then when I was in high school, I'm gonna say ninth, maybe 10th grade, I had a teacher, Susan Aiken. Still, thankfully, I would still consider her a teacher and a friend to this day. She turned me on to the world of slam poetry. And she would take students to poetry slams. We'd go to the Craft Brewery in Kalamazoo. She brought poets when they were touring the region into our high school gym to perform. And it was mind-blowing, and it opened up a whole new world of possibility for me. I grew up in a very, very small farming community in a sort of isolated area of the Midwest, kind of Amish farming, an hour from any major stores type of place, an hour or more. And so to sort of be turned on to these poets who were touring through the region in high school was everything. And by senior year, she had a group of us going with her to the university that was an hour away, and like teaching. We had the opportunity. She'd take us in to teach slam poetry writing workshops, and I would compete, and it was so fun, especially as kind of a nerdy, introverted kid who was very, very not athletic. It was life-changing to have access to this sort of competitive, performative thing, where the points didn't matter and it was about connection, and it was just so fun. So that kind of ignited even further this love of poetry, and then I continued through college, and it's poetry and theater are just like so symbiotic, and such, like, they just weave together so naturally for me. And so it just made a lot of sense to sort of study theater and to kind of keep weaving those paths together.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When I was younger, I was definitely not a fan of poetry. Mainly, I blame the school system. It seemed to turn me off to quite a few things. I did English literature as a GCSE, which was the qualification before. So it always confuses me with Americans. So we've got school, then college, then university. But our college is actually more so your high school. Our university is your college. So with GCSEs, that's when you're sort of 15, 16. That's the sort of the main baseline qualifications that basically everyone needs to have, really. And with those, we did English literature, and there was certain elements of it I did enjoy, but we did a poetry module. And there was a couple of poems I really liked. There's one called Half Caste, which I was really, really enjoyed. It's about someone being called. It was a gentleman who was, I can't remember what ethnicity he was, but he was a mixed race individual. And at that time, calling someone half caste is obviously would be offensive. And obviously now it is. Then it was when just before it was sort of becoming a thing you shouldn't say about individuals. And he says it, and he's got this poem and it's written phonetically. And then he recorded this poet himself saying it, and he says it with such vigor and such like aggression about people calling him half caste. He's like, what are you saying about me, half caste? You saying I'm half a soul or half a person? These sort of things. And it was a very powerful poem, and I've always remembered that. And I'd recommend people check it out, especially if you can find the audio recording of. It's not a long poem.
Show notes.
Yes, it will be in the show notes. But that I loved, but then with every one that was that amazing, I read about 10 that were really boring and just didn't interest me. They're either just the da 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 da, and they rhymed, and the rhymes were really boring and crap, and they were just so bland, and so it turned me off to poetry for a while. And it was when I was getting into music a lot, and I was getting a lot into heavy metal and rap. So both of those things, I was like, this poetry to me just sounds like music without, it sounds like the lyrics to a song without music. Why would I want to listen to loads of poetry if I can listen to poetry spoken for me, heavy metal stuff and being an angsty teen and that sort of jazz. And so I kind of went off it for a while, and then I was seeing someone for quite a while and they were really into poetry. And then I went with them to see poetry live, at like a gig thing sort of. And it was kind of like an open mic night, but specifically for poetry. And I was hesitant, but I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. And about half of them were really good. About a quarter were fantastic, and I was blown away. I was like, that should be. I was like, if that was released with like this wasn't the music at the time, but if this was released like Billie Eilish style, just someone almost half talking, whispering it with just really simple background stuff that's really cool sounding. If that was released now, some of the stuff I heard then would be massive in music. So I heard that, and then I ended up writing a poem of my own. It was quite an aggressive one about God. It was, I used to be quite a militant atheist. Now I'm more agnostic, but I don't really believe there's a deity necessarily. But it's a question that, it was, I went to like a Catholic primary school, and there's lots of, I had a lot of issues with religion and whatnot, but I'm not specifically against religion or religious individuals at the moment. I just have certain issues with things. But with this poem, I wrote about that, and then I performed it at another little gig thing that was quite fun with a few other people. And then it kind of just tapered off and somewhat disappeared for a while. So that's kind of my very long-winded poetry story about my life and poems. But with yourself, I wrote that one, and then myself and Megan actually wrote poems for each other for Tonya's podcast, 52 Love. Oh. Yeah. I'll link to that too. Where,
Please do.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We wrote poems about each other. So I've written 2 poems, and the feedback of the one with both of them was actually very positive. But the one with Megan and Tonya especially was very positive feedback. But with you write poems like a lot. You are actually a poet. I'm a dabbler. You're a podcast dabbler. I've been in the podcasting realm for many years now, but it's the other way around. With poetry, you've got massive amount of things. You've got blog posts on it. You're a part of the Wisdom Body Collective as well. You've got, and now this is where I would have put a warning at the start for the intro thing, but just for YouTube listeners, I don't usually do that. We're about to say some language that is quite spicy. Okay, it's explicit language. Okay, it's the C-bomb. We're going to be talking about that, and so you have cunt poems as well. So Cunt Poems is, I do want to talk about that, but reining back, with you writing poetry and you explaining it was kind of like a form of expression, I think, and like an outlet in a lot of ways for yourself with the slam poetry, how did that kind of translate into you deciding to write poetry for blogs and things and actually releasing it to the world?
Poetry saved my life, period. And I've been publishing poetry, self-publishing, and I've had a couple of my slam poems early on were in small regional anthologies, but I've been self-publishing work since I think my first self-published book I put out in 2005.
Oh wow.
Maybe 2000. I think it was 2005 or 2006. And so the DIY self-publishing scene is my sort of heart and soul and kind of where I came into it, and just the idea that poetry is the lifeblood and revolutionary force moving the world in the direction that I would like it to move. So sort of that, like, I don't know, my mom often says, like, it's that Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I think circulating poetry, performing poetry has always been that sort of like that for me. So I got away from publishing for almost, I guess, probably close to 10 years when I was kind of in the midst of teaching theater and moving and just, living life. Always still writing though. I always have a notebook or a journal. Like here's a sketchbook that I just filled over the summer in Colorado. And at this point, I think this one will become kind of its own published chapbook, and it's art and poems. So eventually I had been teaching and I had a job. I had my bachelor's degree, which is the 4-year university degree. And I was teaching in a high school, and I realized that I didn't really love teaching high school. I knew I wanted to pursue a master's in something to have kind of open up the doors. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted that to be. I didn't want to take the GRE. I don't like standardized tests. So that narrowed down the options. I knew I wanted something low residency so I could live at home, narrowed it down a little more. And then I came to this MFA in poetry, and I thought, perfect. An opportunity to do the thing that I love to do anyway, minimal tests. And when I finish, I'll be qualified to teach college, which I think is a better fit for me than teaching high school. So in the course of the MFA, there's a lot of, traditionally, there's a lot of emphasis put on publishing formally and that as a practice. And in order to kind of gain, what's the word I'm looking for? Become, to like, be attractive as a teacher at a university. If you're teaching English and poetry, you have to have books that aren't just self-published. So that was where I kind of got connected with the Wisdom Body Collective. And that was a few other women who were in the similar program at the same university. And they have a pretty fabulous publishing endeavors. We put out the De Prima tribute anthology. And then it was actually another woman in that collective, Amy, who, and of course we have this little like writing circle going. So we'll send each other kind of what we're writing, what we're working on. And I had this collection, I had written it kind of in a whirlwind a couple summers ago. And I sent it to her, and she was like, "Oh, you should publish this with Wisdom Body Collective and call it Cunt Poems." I was like, "Oh, great, let's do that." And it had been kind of this like loose sort of digging into femininity and womanhood and kind of all of those things intersecting, and also the language and the kind of ways that like the stories that we tell each other and tell ourselves about ourselves become our reality. So I was doing a lot of thinking about like, well, what are the stories that I tell myself about myself in terms of like ability, disability, in terms of like gender, sexuality, in terms of like, what does it mean to inhabit the body of a woman in this life, in this world, in this social context? And that just all came out as this chapbook. And it's still kind of an ongoing study.
Yeah, and with poetry as well, it's one thing I noticed, especially from the poems on your blog, is that with poetry, it's the freedom. With a book, you do have a degree of freedom with writing a full book, but obviously, it has to normally be a proper, several hundred pages, although it's a novella, and even then, it realistically has to be kind of about 100, unless it's a short story, and then it goes into like collections and things, maybe even 50 pages. But with a poem, it can be one line, it can be literally a sentence, but it could also be, 12 pages worth. You can write it where things rhyme, things don't rhyme. It has the same amount of syllables per line. It doesn't. I noticed on a couple of yours, you had it so that the margin for certain words is different to obviously other ones. Kind of either so you have an illustrated image. I've seen some poems do, or other ones where it's like the movement of the words impacts how one reads them, and how it kind of your own internal reading of a poem can affect how you kind of translate it in certain ways. And so it's one of those things where there's this freedom to poetry, which I think is similar to music, which is that kind of thing where you can really do anything you want. You have poems that swear, that don't, for kids that aren't, any kind of amount of freedom for it. And when you have collectives that allow and foster for those kinds of ideas, it means that things can come out not necessarily unfiltered, but you don't have to smoothen out the edges in certain ways for other people to consume. You're putting it in a very specific medium of your own kind of how your mind perceives things, maybe, or how you're just kind of, you've got this thought, and rather than putting it in a air quotes coherent sentence, you can kind of formulate this emotional passage with a release. So it's interesting, like, how you got involved with those things, and with poetry itself, like with cunt poems in particular. Like, I assume they are mainly surrounding the word cunt.
A lot of them. There's one poem where it's repeated several times, but then there's other stuff there are other poems in the book where it's not mentioned at all, and it's kind of more thinking around this concept of what it means to like be called a cunt, to like have one, to be possessing of the physical apparatus, as it were. So it's more of a anchoring concept than an intention to like desensitize, to like hammer the word out as many times as possible. But on the other hand, I'm really interested in kind of undoing this stigma around the word, or this stigma, because we have no problem calling women bitches, sluts, hoes, etc. But there's something to, I don't know, this idea of like saying the word for yourself, and like I don't know if reclaiming it is the right word, but kind of like stepping in and inhabiting the word for yourself, and instead of it being something that's kind of put on you or like projected onto, kind of standing in it for myself and saying, okay, well, what does this mean to me? Why is it significant? What do I feel about it? What do I think into it? Like, let me think with this word for a while on my own terms for myself, without kind of all of these other narratives being projected onto me, or if they are, like thinking with those consciously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like it because you did say slightly earlier when you were elaborating on cunt poems that it was about sort of femininity as well, or sort of one's own definition of that. Societies, like, there's the word cunt itself, as you very well eloquently put, it's the most taboo word, I think, other than the N word, and then I think the homophobic slur beginning with an F is probably overtaking cunt now, I think. But aside from those two, which are for very different reasons, very different to the word cunt, they have a lot of historical weight on them, especially the N word, and there's a lot of stuff I'm not even going to go near with that word. But with the word cunt, it's one of those where in the UK and the US, it's considered the worst swear word. You've got things like crap and bitch and bastard and things like that, which no one really cares about those, and bloody hell that no one really cares about. And then you've got shit, which used to kind of be not necessarily a problem, but it was like, you shouldn't really say shit. And then in all the sort of 12A movies and basically every Marvel movie now, it's like, oh, let's see how many we can put in. 2, 3, 4, 5. But then you watch Ghostbusters from the 80s. It's a PG. They say shit like 8 times or 9. And it's like, oh, so shit is this weird word where it's kind of not accepted, but it kind of always is accepted. No one in a workplace ever drops something and says shit and has ever been told off for it, because
Right.
if you call someone a piece of shit, that's very different to saying shit when you drop something. So it's a weird. And then you get the one step above that and you get fuck, which is, the most diverse word probably in the English language. And you can just, it's a verb, a noun, and maybe an adjective to some degree, but it's it's a word that can be used in a lot of different ways. But you have cunt, and apart from referring to, the woman's genitalia, aside from referring to that, which calling it that in any way is a very, very strong way to say. There's many words one could use for that. There you go. The vagina or vulva. I know Ria wants to ensure people saying vulva a lot more, or you can be more like when I'm trying to be careful or at work or anything, it's like genitalia or the downstairs region or nether regions, or sometimes if I'm having fun, front bum, whatever you want to call it. But it's weird that cunt, aside from it used to describe that word, which is quite infrequently, it's almost purely an insult. And as you said, it's very much more of an insult. Like, if you call a guy a cunt, it doesn't seem to be as much of a big deal. But if you call a woman a cunt, it's got a lot more weight to it. So I wonder if, like, I did a little bit of research on some things that you shared on Twitter, and I'm going to include them in the description. That's the word of the day, description. Or cunt, one or the other. Is the sort of origins of the word cunt. So I wanted to ask you, the word itself, obviously you're American, so in your the place that you are living, it's a bit more of a sensitivity thing, I think, for society. You don't have very many TV shows that say cunt in it. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your opinion on the word, really. Because it's a fun thing to say.
I would like to say that I am a totally freewheeling cunt user, cunt person. But I must say, when my mother-in-law asked me what my new book was called, my partner and I looked at each other, and he was like, "You can tell her." And I almost didn't. And for my own part, I of course sent a copy to my mom because she wouldn't have it any other way. And I was shocked. I was shocked when she came back and she was like, "Oh, I need more copies of this. I have to share it with so and so, and like, women need to read this." That was not the response I was expecting from my mom. But she's just a cool lady. My opinion on the word in general, I think it's so fascinating that it's so common for like in a lot of hip hop songs. I've noticed lately, like, men rapping about how other men are pussies as like a huge insult. And I find that so hilarious and stupid. But I find cunt fascinating and intriguing. And I think maybe my opinion on the word is more of a curiosity and a fascination, and still a developing entity. I've just been reading the book Cunt, A Declaration of Independence by Inga Muschio. I hope I'm saying your name right. I've never heard it out loud. It's a fabulous book. And it's interesting because I thought, in creating this chapbook, I kind of thought I was in something. Amy and I talked about this when we were doing the Kickstarter, like how it's so edgy that people might not want to buy it. And I like, do we want to be careful titling it this? And that was where like the posts about kind of the definition and the etymology came into play. Because I was like, well, do I need to justify why I called it this? I think maybe there's room for some education. We should like talk about it. And then since it's come out, there's this book called Cunt. One of this fabulous harpist from Detroit, Aya Simone. I just saw something on Twitter the other day where she was like, declared, "I'm a cunt," in a tweet. And I was like, but the way that Inga Muschio phrases it, she's sort of like resurrecting the word as this womanly declaration of independence, and sort of takes the opportunity in titling a book this to create a manifesto and a resource book and this sort of like whole course on like why female pleasure should be prioritized and why as women we should, you know, venture into the world of pleasure in all forms, sexual and otherwise, and really prioritize the sensual and pleasureful experiences. And also like she provides a lot of resources for like how to do that safely and how to the book even talks about, it's got like abortion stories in it, for instance. So I think, to make a very long story even longer, where I kind of land on with the word cunt is sort of offers to me an opportunity to really think with this complex spectrum of issues in a way that's kind of fun and kind of not so linear.
Yeah, it's not a clear-cut word. It's a word that's very much down for interpretation, which is one thing that's intriguing about most swear words, is that, you know, you get certain individuals who are like, oh yeah, I hate this swear word. You know, there's often words that people hate, and then moist is one that people always seem to say they hate. But there's certain words people don't like, and there's swear words that people can be very offended by. You know, if you drop cunt in the workplace, even in England, you can, like, people are like, oh my God, can you believe you said that? But if you're down the pub, and, you know, and it depends on who you call that. You know, if you call a colleague a cunt and you're not being like, you silly cunt, you know, that's different in a drinking situation than it is if you say that with a different inflection. That could be incredibly offensive. And swear words seem to be down to interpretation, whereas most other words are, for the most part, just that's what the word means. It's almost infallible. But when you get a word that's so taboo, but it's not taboo all over the world. Obviously, the English language is not spoken as the primary language of every single country, but the three sort of main countries being US, UK, and Australia, like in this example, because I don't know how Canada view the word cunt, with those sort of three, the United States, UK, and Australia say it constantly, and they are not fussed by it at all. Cunt is just almost like saying mate. And then in the UK, it's kind of like, before the watershed, you don't even think of that word. And then afterwards, you're like, yeah, say it all you want. Not the 9 p.m. on TV, once it gets past the 9 p.m. slot on the watershed, it might be 9:30 now, but around that time on TV, it just goes from like Downton Abbey to just Naked Attraction, if you know what that is. Okay, it's a show where people get it's a show. Megan absolutely loves it, and it's quite it's quite an important British TV show. It seems to be. Basically, you have a person who is attracted to either men or women or both, and they go up there and they're completely naked and they speak to the host. Sorry, no, they're fully clothed. They speak to the host, and then there's 5 people behind. There's like a coloured door that slowly rises, and you see the genitals first, and then you have to choose one of the 5 people to eliminate based on their genitals. Then it lifts up further, and you see the neck down, and you choose another person to get rid of. Then you see their whole body, and they're standing there completely naked, and then I think once everyone's revealed, then the person who's been eliminating them, they then get naked, and then they choose someone else to go, and then they have a conversation with someone else, and then they go off on a date with one person. And it does that. They've got, Megan loves calling them the double willy episodes, which is when you get normally a gay man and a homosexual man and a heterosexual woman, because it's normally 2 people per episode, so one person goes on, does it, blah, blah. And sometimes you get it where it's, you know, double wheelie episodes. So there's just, you get to see potentially 12 dicks, but normally 11. 11
and you
penises.
really, like, on British TV, you really see it all. You can see
no
everything.
blurring.
It's just on your television.
Camera just goes and just does not stop, and it's just a man's flaccid penis with however many piercings. They talk about the pubic hair. They talk about how the penis looks and things, and they do the opposite. You know, when it's a heterosexual guy looking at women, they speak out the breasts and the vagina and the vulva and the sort of the area. They get people to turn around, look at their bums, and then they do talk about their face and talk to them. And often when a man's got a small penis and the woman doesn't want to say that, they're like, oh, his I don't like his posture. I just feel like the way he's standing isn't as good as the rest. It's like, you know,
he's got a small one. That's funny.
Well, yeah, it's one of those funny things, but, you know, sometimes the woman goes, yeah, I'm going to get rid of that one. Why is that? His penis is far too big. Look at the size of it, and this flaccid. I can't deal with that. And it's like, okay, and this guy walks out and is like, massive smile on his face saying, sorry that I was too big, I guess, and then goes, and then it's on to the next one. So it's a real honest show. It's very, I don't necessarily...
Naked Attraction?
Naked Attraction. It's on Channel 4 normally. It's online. You can watch it on all 4. Just get a VPN, make an account. You have to watch ads of English car insurance adverts, but you get to see a lot of stuff. Yeah. So with England, it's weird because they don't say cunt on Naked Attraction, to clarify. But I don't know why I mentioned Naked Attraction, but it's one of those things. I think in Britain, the word cunt isn't quite as bad as over in America, I think, because you guys don't like having penises on screen. It's basically HBO.
No. We only like women exploited naked on screen here.
Yeah. It's because men are gross. But I'm joking. That's in jest. I'm not saying that's a reason to objectify women for generations.
Wow. My mind is a little bit blown by this TV show right now, and the fact that it's not taboo in the UK. And I'm absolutely going to look it up and watch it. But it's interesting that they don't say cunt on the show. I don't know.
There's a lot to process for someone like an American hearing. You can see, did you say 11 penises on one TV show? Is that what you just said? Yes. And also,
it's just on like regular anybody TV. It's not pay-per-view, not HBO. It's not that.
It's Channel 4. It's the UK's, so it's the 4th channel. When back in the olden days, before there was like, as you guys call it, cable, we had like Sky and Freeview and things. BBC 1, BBC 2, then ITV, which is Channel 3, and then Channel 4. And they've been around for BBC since the very early days, but Channel 4 and ITV for decades and decades and decades. And then we got 5, and then eventually started spreading to more channels and stuff. But yeah, Channel 4 has always been, a lot of the time, a lot more progressive in certain ways. It's got a lot of reality TV on there and a lot of nonsense, but it's also got quite a lot of progressive. It's got a lot of original LGBTQ plus programming that's not and it's not to say any programming is like this or to downplay it, but it's not like this is just, we're trying to be woke, here's loads of, it's like written by members of that community, it's positive, but it's also doesn't shy away from important issues. There's a show called, I think there's Fleabag and a few other shows like that. I love
Fleabag. I've seen a couple of episodes of that. I haven't gotten back to it though.
I think that's Channel 4. I'm fairly certain. But yeah, in Britain it's very odd. We're quite prim and proper in some ways, but we're also really casual about other things. It's a really weird. In America, it makes me think more so of the way it's like more in Italy and in Spain, where because there's such a huge religious element to things, a lot of sexuality in just normal human body, the Adam and Eve, a lot of that sort of stuff, even though it should be a natural thing, it's very hidden and very closed away. You don't talk about those
repressed.
Things. Yeah, and then behind closed doors, it's mental, but it's quiet. Whereas in Britain, it's like one or two steps reined back from that. There is a lot of prudishness and how you should be prim and proper, but there's also just this switch that goes off in British people. It seems to be from 9-10 p.m. everyone in town becomes immediately drunk and disorderly.
So you can be a freak after 9 p.m. in England.
Yes, that's correct. And we're the main time zone. We're the time zones that everyone in the world bases their time zone on. So 9 p.m. GMT or UTC, that time, that's the freak time.
9 p.m. GMT is freak time. I'm with it.
I mean, that was 2 hours ago now for us. So we've passed that, I'm afraid. It's now 11, so we're getting near the end of freak time. It gets like 12, and then you get the bedrock of TV, and then that's when in town you've got to about 1-2 a.m, and then that's when all the clubs start to close. So you haven't got long. Okay,
a little bit of condensed freakiness. I don't know why, but it makes me wonder have you seen the show This May Destroy You?
No, I haven't actually.
It's is that title right? I have to Google this, but I think it is. This May Destroy You. It's probably my favorite British TV show. Michaela Cole wrote it and stars in it. And it's semi-autobiographical. The star that she plays, Arabella, it starts with her being sexually assaulted in a nightclub, and the show kind of unravels as her life around and behind it. It's got one of the best soundtracks on TV, I think. And it's such a smart, funny highly entertaining, freaky show.
I think I found it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it I May Destroy You?
Yes, I made it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it. Yeah, because Michaela Colt, she's in Fleabag, I think.
Oh.
Is it Fleabag or is it Bubblegum? It's Chewing Gum. Chewing Gum, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
She's in Chewing Gum, not Bubblegum. Yeah.
Another great show.
Yeah, because she's a massive up-and-comer. I mean, she's already starting to be in quite a few big things, but she's going to be massive if she's not already considered. But yeah, I May Destroy You. I'll make a... It's going to be the biggest show notes episode ever. It's going to be great. People are going to come away from this episode with so much content to consume.
Good. Go read, watch, listen, get your freak on after 9 p.m.
Yeah, not before, not 8:59. Don't do any of that shit. It's just, you have to wait. Everyone's kind of there with their cups of tea. And then as soon as 9 p.m, the tea goes down, empty. Everyone looks up. And suddenly, people saying cunt on the BBC. Well, so I want to ask with yourself, there's another element of you. Obviously, there's poetry and the word cunt and things, and I do want to get into those things as well. But I want to ask you, well, it's just in my mind, of yoga. You specifically on, I think it's your website, you've mentioned yoga is quite important to you. And I just wondered if you would be willing to speak about that a little bit, about how you either first got into yoga or why yoga, basically, is probably the best open-ended question.
I love that question. So in 2007, my freshman year, the summer before my freshman year of university, I was in a bicycle accident and broke my back and had a bunch of nerve damage from that. So I get to college and I'm supposed to be studying acting, but I felt kind of, not great. Had just come through this back surgery, sort of, plus being an awkward teenager, all of that. And Ren Pruis, the director of the all-female version of Hamlet, also happened to teach the only yoga classes on campus. And as a student at this college that I went to, you were required to take a certain number of physical education classes. So I took yoga because it seemed like the least offensive thing that I could actually do while kind of relearning how to walk and be mobile without hurting myself. And it does involve impact. There's no balls being thrown at you. I don't like things where balls are being thrown at me. So I took a yoga class with her, and then I took another one, and then I took another one. And I found that not only as I started to kind of deepen my practice, actually pay attention, sort of do the exercises at home, not only did I start to heal physically in a way that physical therapy and kind of the narcotics that they had given me were not doing, I could access a little more mindfulness, and I could be with myself a little bit more in ways that I had sort of lost sight of. And then it just kept going, and I got more and more interested in kind of deepening my own practice. And eventually, when I moved out here to Arizona, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do in life. I was working at a lot of cafes, restaurants, bars, and yoga teaching was becoming kind of trendy. And I was like, oh, well, I already like teaching and I can already do it in theater and creative writing. And I feel like yoga has really enhanced my own practices of writing and performing. So what if I learn how to teach this other thing, and then maybe I can braid them all together? So I went and got my 200-hour yoga teaching certification and taught in a couple of yoga studios here in the Valley for a couple of years. It was great, but I got a little bored doing that. And so then I went back to teaching kind of theater and creative writing, and then would integrate like meditations or sun salutations into these other workshops, and have found a lot of fun and success doing that. And then just personally as a practice, well, I don't necessarily like pop up and do sun salutations every day. I'm not I'm not great about like starting every day with a sitting meditation, but I do start every day with some sort of mindfulness practice, whether it's dream journaling, whether it's looking at the sun, whether it's, lying on the floor and just focusing on my breath. And I don't know, it makes me feel like a better person when I do it. I'm a happier person, healthier person. Even to the point where my partner can tell when I'm not doing these things and will ask me very directly, have you written in your journal today? Have you stretched today? Which in the moment it's like, no. But it's inevitably the answer is always, oh no, you know what? I haven't done that. Let me go take a time out. So that's my yoga story.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I've not specifically delved into yoga and things. I've dabbled. I've done a few poses and things, but mainly when I've been doing home fitness stuff. I've not done like a proper yoga session and things. I've done mindfulness and meditation. I'm a proponent of the breathing exercises thing. For me, I like doing it at work when I've had a really stressful day or something, or life, like when we first got the dog and things like that, and everything was quite intense. A couple of lunch times, I just went out for set an alarm on my phone, and there's a really nice field near where I work. It's like 5 minutes to get to. Just lay there with like a hoodie under my head and just laid on the grass, eyes closed, hearing just the sounds of nature, and it's in the summer and things, so when the sun was out, feeling the rays of the sun on me, and just focusing on my breathing for 10 minutes or so. I like to have a visualization of mindfulness where bad thoughts eventually come in your head with any form of meditation, things like that. It's just how you kind of let them flow past and go through and whatever. And whenever I get them, I visualize in my head, like I focus on, when I close my eyes, I focus on the darkness, and obviously your eyes can't focus on it. So it's like an infinite thing. Focus on the darkness, and then visualize the air going in and out of your lungs, and etc. And then when bad thoughts eventually come in, I think of them being written on a chalkboard, and then someone just wiping. You do one perfect chalk wipe, which never happens in reality, but you've got the eraser and you just do the one and it's gone. And it's just a little bit of the chalk dust left. That's kind of how I think. And then I kind of think of it being then the slate of chalk being moved, being like, that was just a negative thought, so it goes to over there. And then another one comes out, and it's a positive thought, and then you wipe that and put that to that side. And so that's how I kind of do my meditation and mindfulness. But I do that occasionally when I'm stressed. And especially if I can't sleep, I find a lot of the time, if I've been having an intense day or something, often if I'm laying in bed and my heart's racing, even if I'm quite tired, you feel like, I'm just not going to be able to sleep. With mindfulness meditation, I'm sure you're aware, you can just slow your own heart rate. So if you do breathing exercises slower and more steady, and just think about the breath going in and out, and then if any panicky thoughts come in, you just think about them, move to one side in a certain way. I quite like the idea of the sand gardens that people make, and then when you're done, you just wipe it clear. You made a really lovely pattern and thing, you spend a very long time doing it, wipe it away, it's fine. And that kind of mindset and things help me either sleep or calm down over certain things. So I have heard that yoga is more of a physical element of that, but in doing such physical activity, which requires a lot of stretching, and when you go to the gym and stuff, which I used to do quite a bit, and lifting weights, it's intense in the sense of you hyper focus on the weights. You're doing reps and things, so you're looking at the weights, and you don't have to think. And in certain ways, that's good when you're in a difficult place. Doing exercise like that can be very beneficial to you, but you're not having to not think, you're not having to process your thought, because you can just focus on this thing you're doing there. But with yoga, because a lot of it is poses and holding a position for 30 seconds or a minute or things like that, you can't put yourself in a position, and apart from thinking of this is uncomfortable or trying to focus on things, the only way to get through it is to think about your breathing and to just kind of tune out of your own body, be like, yeah, this aches, but let's just not think about the time. Let's just know that in 30 seconds the beeper will go off, or I'm counting in my head, however one does it, and just kind of letting it go through there. So you saying it being a very important part of your own mental health and your mindfulness is really nice to hear. Do you have any recommendations for people? I know you've been teaching yoga. Give people a 1 or 2 minute snippet that's going to make them never need a yoga class. Go. I'm joking.
Oh my God.
I'm obviously joking, to clarify.
I love, one of the things that I love most about a yoga practice is that I inadvertently began to be, we can be in our bodies doing a thing like a pose or lifting weights and simultaneously somewhere totally different. But as as you start to like deepen the yoga practice and they talk about you match the breath with the movement, and in order to match breath with movement, and then this is true in dance too. This is true in dance as well, but you have to match breath with movement, you have to be really present in your body. And I think that's probably the biggest inadvertent gift of yoga, is like learning how to actually be in and feel pleasure and joy inhabiting the body, like being in it, being with it, even if it's like achy, creaky, like registering the ache, but befriending it. And sort of being with it. And I love your chalkboard visualizations. I think my favorite is the standing on a bridge looking into a river, and the thought is a lily pad or a leaf that floats by. So I think that might be the 2-minute yoga that you never have to do yoga again. Just do some breathing, guided meditation, breathing and visualization.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing what one can achieve when you just kind of shut the world off, especially in the modern age with the technological revolution that we're in. With smartphones, I love Reddit. It's one of those things, it's very easy to go down a Reddit rabbit hole and just be scrolling for ages. And I know with Twitter and all kinds of other social media sites, it can happen. And it's easier said than done. But just taking a few minutes in your day occasionally to not necessarily specifically think about things, just let the thoughts kind of come to you and just let yourself gently process them in your own time in a way that is constructive. It's very undervalued. And I think even if people, they don't have to do it necessarily every day. Everyone's got a different way of doing things. Megan has got a journal as well, and she's especially very stressed, normally about an event coming up, either it's a holiday or something she's organising for someone, and there's a lot of moving parts and things. I mean, I'm a massive list writer. I've got notebooks all around me for every podcast thing I do and otherwise. But I think the mindfulness thing is very important. But we're getting nearer the end of time now, so I just want to ask, there's one last sort of part that I want to ask you about, and it's something I've realised while speaking with you, and it's the teacher whose name I've forgotten, and you've said it 2 or 3 times now, so apologies, but it feels like that teacher has had a massive influence on your life in the sense of, reigniting love of being in theatre as well as poetry and lots of other elements in yoga, but also, do you think that they also were an influence on your career path trajectory because you were a teacher, you love teaching individuals, and it sounds absolutely. Like your awakening in some ways came from that?
I have been so blessed and privileged, and I'm just so grateful for the teachers multiple teachers that I've had in my life. Before Susan Aiken in high school with the slam poetry, there was my grandma Virginia was a teacher in a 1-room schoolhouse, my dad's mom. That was her career. She was a 1-room schoolhouse teacher. And I had a couple of fabulous teachers in elementary school who, and some librarians who would let me just sit in the library and read books instead of going out to do the activities on the playground. And then Ren Pruis at Kalamazoo College, has absolutely influenced my career choice, most specifically in that she and Susan both have always been very attentive to and supportive of kind of alternative routes. So by Ren was the first person she recognized that I was very into yoga before I did, I think. And she used to call me yoga. And she was actually the person that recommended that I take my first dance class, which opened up kind of a whole nother relationship and realm of like movement and kind of falling in love with my own body and capacity to move and breathe and do things with it. And also they're both highly independent women who have not been afraid to take kind of meandering or non-traditional career paths. And so I think I was very lucky to have some strong role models who were showing me alternatives to grow up, get married, have a traditional career, have a baby, blah, 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 blah. So I've always felt a lot of freedom to kind of explore and try things, but yeah, teachers have had a huge influence and impact on my life, and I'd say that's very much lent to my dedication to continuing to teach in some capacity. Like I very much the adage, I'm forgetting who this is attributed to, each one teach one. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it's one of those things that teachers are very undervalued in all of Western society, be it the value that society brings on them in a metaphorical sense, but also in the value financially, how much they get paid for things. It is baffling, no matter where you kind of look, really. I think there's a few Scandinavian countries, I think, where teachers get paid fairly well, but I think for the most part in the Western world, that's not the case. But yeah, I mean, you've been a teacher for us for this whole conversation with about not only elements of your life, but also certain elements that I especially wasn't that knowledgeable about, poetry and things, as well as, because of your poetry, especially your Cunt Poems, it made me look up more information about cunt and things, and obviously also yoga and just a lot of the things, even in this discussion, although it has been, a back and forth between the two of us, all the things that you've said have at least contained pieces of knowledge in there, which would be teaching. You can feel the teacher vibes coming through, really, in all the right ways, in all the ways that you eloquently put things and the way that you explain matters. And even like little parts, I could see that you were a good teacher, because I notice Megan does similar things where when you just offhand comment about, you notice a lot of kids didn't like the certain way of teaching, so you searched and you spent extra time that you didn't have to do looking up for podcasts and other audio resources that you didn't have to do. You could have stuck to the curriculum and given them a textbook and said read pages 5 to 10 for the next hour. But you went the extra mile, because when you were that age or when you were younger and things like that, you had those interactions with teachers who did spend the extra time just to get to know you as an individual, or to try and do other things that were the non-standard, but weren't anything like extreme and off-the-wall bananas necessarily, but something that worked within the confines of the curriculum while still being different and interesting and important. And so it does come across in the way you speak about things and just these stories that you say, that you clearly do care about teaching, and you are very passionate about all the many arts that you're involved with. So I'm sure that anyone who has been taught by you is incredibly thankful, because you're coming across very well in this podcast, and you'd be a fantastic teacher, I'm sure.
That is such a massive compliment, and so kind of you to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been delightful. So, Ada, final things to say before we wrap this call up. I'll include a link to your website and whatnot, and any social media that you want me to. But just any final comments you want to tell people, and also any other things of where people can find you.
I'm not the most active on social media, but I exist on Instagram and Twitter. Read books. Listen to that George Floyd book, for sure. And I don't know. Read books. Try yoga if you haven't tried yoga. And go dance. I think that's my other.
Nice.
What I want to say.
That's amazing. Yeah, and also write stuff down. Physically. Right. There's something. Notebooks are great. They're very cheap. It's also very fun when you see a cute notebook that you really like a cover of, and you can just, like, Megan bought me this. People watching video will be able to see it. Bought me this nice little, just a little llama, and on the back, it's just because either llamas or alpacas. They're very cute, and in there I do my notes for my Star Wars show now, because I filled up my my last Star Wars notebook up, and this one is my genuine Chit-Chat notebook. So I've got all of the notes for all the different genuine Chit-Chat stuff I've done that, and I think this is Stranger Things. Yes, this is a Stranger Things cover as well. So nice. You just see a cool notebook, and it doesn't cost too much money. But writing in them, I've got notebooks everywhere. There's another one here of a Game Boy cartridge, and I've got in here guests for genuine Chit-Chat. Oh,
that's cute.
Yeah, I got it.
Let's see. While we're doing the notebook display, I've got the Dream Journal.
Nice.
I still do longhand planner.
Yeah.
Notebooks are great. Get yourself a notebook. Write in it.
Yeah. Write anything in it. Write your thoughts, your feelings, dreams you've been having, stuff you like, stressed about things. Writing stuff down physically, like doing notes on your phone is beneficial, but writing things down physically, when you have like a little, like always have post-it notes. Just make sure always have post-it notes in the house, because you have no idea how important and useful a post-it note can be, and also how you just, if you want to get a thought out, just write some stuff down. You have to show anyone. Just write it down. It'll make you feel so much better. But thank you, Ada, so much for being so generous with your time. I know that you're involved in a huge amount of different things, and I know that this is just the beginning of your podcasting career. We can thank Tony for that, and obviously then Rhea and Tonya for fostering it, and because of them, all three of those individuals, then we got connected. And then, you know, you already got saying that you've got other plans to do more things. There's stuff in the background with Tony that you're doing, and there's going to be other shows I'm sure you'll be popping up in, and you joined our lovely Discord as well, so you're chatting with us there. So
a lot of fun.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll make sure with all the different things we spoke about, there's going to be stuff in the show notes about the many books that you named, as well as the poems we discussed and a couple of other things. And I will say to people as well, there's an audio track called Omega by a band called Stone Sour. Now, I love the band Stone Sour. The frontman, Corey Taylor, who's of Slipknot fame, on their first album, it's the last track on the standard edition, but it's like the sixth to last track on the deluxe edition. But it's a song called Omega.
I really like Stone Sour. Okay.
Yeah, I adore them. And I've met Corey Taylor as well. I've seen Stone Sour live like 3 or 4 times. I've seen Slipknot twice. Slipknot changed how I perceive music. So I'm a massive simp for Slipknot. But they've got a song called Omega on their first album. And it's not actually a song. It's just the singer Corey Taylor reading basically a poem. It's just a really long, and it's quite emotional when he says some other stuff in it, but I just would say, if anyone is like I especially was, and is apprehensive about poetry, then Stone Sour Omega is a really cool just audio track. It's only 3 or so minutes long. It's quite an interesting spoken word piece more than anything. And then also Serge Tankian of System of a Down, he's got poetry out, so you can listen to some of his, and also well, there's loads of poetry out there. You know, I'm going to put links in the description, but check out Ada's. She's got poetry on her website.
Halsey, the pop star Halsey, released a book of poetry last year, 2 years ago.
Halsey, so much.
I'll send you the book. I have it.
Oh, I'd love that.
PDF of it.
I adore Halsey. I've been listening to all her albums so much. She is not as big over here in the UK as she is in America, and it deeply saddens me, because I think she's one of the most talented female vocalists of the last decade.
Truly. I feel like we could do another hour just talking about music. Now I'm thinking of so much.
We can.
Anyway.
We can. We'll pencil that in. We'll do it, because there's so many different artists, and we could even, we can briefly talk about it in messaging and things. And if there's any stuff we haven't heard about, like, if obviously we both heard a lot of Halsey, so we can talk about that, but we can also be like, oh, have you heard this artist or this one? And if we haven't, we can listen and do a little music swap and do that on a podcast, and then talk about the songs.
That's great.
That'd be a lot of fun. Awesome. Well, I'll end the call not end the call. I'll stop the recording so I can speak to you just afterwards. That'd be very rude. I did that to Rhea once by accident. I just hung up immediately. I had to message her saying, I'm so sorry. She's like, I thought that ended quite abruptly. But we will end the recording here. Just thank you once again, Ada. You've been delightful.
Thanks for having me on the show, Mike.